Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about the second 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons and what we do with that and how we go deeper, right? And what I want to talk about today specifically is post-traumatic growth, all right? So, all right, let's dig into this. Um, so we tell stories with these player characters as dragon masters, right? Our dungeon master sets the frame, right? They, prepare the campaign and deliver each session. And we, as dragon masters, the 5 dragon masters who sit around the table, each one of us with a player character, the red, the white, the blue, the black, the green dragon master, bringing forward the story of our player character. Our player characters are traumatized. Like, they get attacked by dragons. They get consumed by a gelatinous cube, might have to swim their way out. Now, half their skin is off, right? Like, maybe they're blinded in one eye, right? There's a lot of trauma with these events. These adventures go through trauma, right? So let's think about trauma, right? And so I think the first 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons was, witnessing these player characters be traumatized and be like, oh, well, it sucks to be you. Like, and just keep rolling, right? Well, in the second one, we're going to start to deal with trauma. What does it mean for a player character to be traumatized? Does that player character get post-traumatic stress disorder? If they do, what are the mechanics of that, right? But it goes further. All right, I want to talk about Neal Brennan. All right, so if you don't know, Neal Brennan is crushing it with a new podcast. So Mark Maron came out a while ago, and he has one of the best podcasts that ever happened. I think he interviewed like 400 or 500 microphone or brick wall comedians, right? And he really kind of set a bar that needs to be met when it comes. If you're going to interview stand-up comedians, like Maron's the bar, and nobody's really come even close to that except for Neal Brennan. So Neal Brennan is one of the writers for Dave Chappelle, and he became famous being a writer for Dave Chappelle, and he became quite rich being a writer for Dave Chappelle, right? And he's absolutely brilliant, right? So he had Bill Burr on, right? And the reality is, like, a lot of people are like, oh, there's a brick wall and a microphone comedian. That's not what those guys are anymore. At the top tier, these guys are philosopher kings. That we have philosophers today. There are comedians, right? We also have truth tellers today. Don't look for them anywhere on the political side, right? It's our comedians. There are sages. They're actually not sages. That's about knowledge. These guys are our truth tellers, and these guys are our philosophers, right? This is where modern philosophy is done. This is where truth telling is done. You'll see it, in Neal Brennan's blocks. You'll see it in every Dave Chappelle. Like, you want to talk about philosophy, a philosopher king? I don't think Aristotle had anything on Dave Chappelle, right? That dude is talking about life and making the talk enjoyable, making you want to hear it, make you want to listen, right? If you don't know, Dave Chappelle is the modern Aristotle, period. Because that's what it is, right? So Neal Brennan is talking to Bill Burr, right? And they're talking about trauma, right? And Neal Brennan said something brilliant, and I was like, wait, what did you guys say? Right? He says, yeah, everybody talks about trauma and their post-traumatic stress disorder, and everybody talks about how bad the trauma has messed them up. But people don't talk about post-traumatic growth. Yes, you were traumatized. Yes, you went through something. Yes, you had a level of suffering. Yes, you had a level of woe, right? But and I'm adding on to what he said. What he said was, nobody talks about post-traumatic growth. And the second he said it, I knew exactly what he was saying, right? Like, everybody talks about the bad of trauma, but nobody talks about the good of trauma, right? And this is what the second 50 years of Dungeons & Dragons is going to be about, right? It's going to be about us exploring post-traumatic growth with our player characters and saying, okay, like, you fell into a spike pit, right? And a spike went through your left leg, right? And now, the gnome fighter had to chop your leg off, right? And now You know, you're relearning to walk while the rest of your team went off to another dungeon. Right? Yeah, the first 50 years was like, oh, woe is me, roll up another character. Right? The second 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons is role-playing through that. Right? Having those player characters come back and visit you. Right? And then one of them takes you through the montage of, you know, of learning to walk again, and you experience post-traumatic growth, right? Not just post-traumatic stress disorder, but what is the value of trauma, right? And what's too much and what's too little, right? And these explorations would be first of all, they'd be outrageously expensive to even attempt in real life, and you don't have the time or the money in your lifetime to explore post-traumatic growth in your real life. The risk is too high, the cost is too high, the pain is too high. But you can do it with a player character, right? That is a reasonable cost. That will take a reasonable amount of time. We can absolutely explore post-traumatic growth, in my humble opinion, with Dungeons and Dragons. That's what the second 50 years is for, right? To explore post-traumatic growth with our player character, and then go, wait a second, I just figured out post-traumatic growth with my player character. Can I achieve post-traumatic growth in my own life? That's Gary's legacy, in my humble opinion. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments below and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.